Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My fabulous co-host is Laura Blackwell, and I hope that you're all healthy and safe and taking care of yourselves and each other. I started Story Hour in early pandemic days during lockdown, and the intention was I just wanted to create a space where my writer friends and I could share our work and kind of build a little bit of community in what was and what in some ways continue to be deeply weird times. With Laura's collaboration, she joined me as co-host shortly thereafter. It's just grown way beyond my initial very modest expectations. We've been here every week. Week in, week out, year in, year out for about 3.5 years now. And just skipping the week between Christmas and New Year's, and that's it. And we have had just an enormous number of incredibly talented writers from every corner of the speculative fiction tent. And as you all know, it's a giant, giant tent. So it's really been a privilege to be a part of this and to have this sort of stewardship role to continue to make it happen and to bring it to all of you out there. The approach here is very simple. You know, we've been sitting around the fire telling each other lies for thousands and thousands of years. That's kind of the art of fiction, and we do that here. We have two writers, a little less than a half an hour each, sharing their work. We strongly prefer complete stories because we want you to experience an arc, a journey, and that's it. So this week, we're really happy to welcome back Nicole LeBoeuf and to welcome Ben Pladek. I'm very happy to announce that we've received a SIFWA Givers Grant for 2023 so that I don't have to keep paying for this out of pocket, and we can continue to keep the lights on and bring you what we really believe is some of the best in spoken word speculative fiction that you can get anywhere, really. And before we go on to authors' recommendations for charities, that's sort of part of what we do here. I want to call your attention to how you can support the writers and other entertainment professionals on the front lines of the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strike. The Entertainment Community Fund was founded in 1882, and it offers this huge spectrum of programs, workshops, support groups, online resources, and even emergency financial assistance to support the unique and essential needs of everybody who works in the performing arts and entertainment. They are entertainmentcommunity.org. You want to help out your brothers and sisters on the front lines of the strike, check that out. As I said, it's our custom also to ask authors to indicate a worthy cause for us to call your attention to. And if you're fortunate enough, if you're in a position to help, that's great. You can help financially. If you can't, just be aware that these entities exist, and they exist to help people, and just know that they're out there. Nicole is reading tonight for the Food Rescue Alliance. That's www.foodrescuealliance.org. And they're a network of food rescue initiatives that work towards a more just and less wasteful food system, locally and regionally. Their network connects through peer learning, resource sharing, and even experimentation. Members encompass values that include health equity, community-driven work, participation, volunteerism, and a commitment to addressing the root causes of hunger. That's foodrescuealliance.org. Ben is reading tonight for Black and Pink Milwaukee. We will post the URL here. It's a little bit dense here. It's linktr.ee/blackandpinkmke. Since 2013, Black and Pink Milwaukee has worked as a mutual aid project with current and formerly incarcerated people who identify across the LGBTQ plus spectrum and people who are in solidarity with people impacted by the prison industrial complex. In recent years, their capacity, their reach has deepened to include providing a bi-monthly local newsletter to over 200 incarcerated folks across the state of Wisconsin, publishing a zine authored by incarcerated folks, and distributing thousands of dollars in direct material support to incarcerated folks. They do this work as a small crew working together to break the social isolation of prisons and eventually abolish the prison industrial complex. So that is Black and Pink Milwaukee. So on to the show. Nicole is going to open for us. Nicole is what we like to call a repeat offender story hour. She has read with us before. Nicole J. LeBoeuf is a New Orleanian writer of short speculative fiction and poetry, appearing in such venues as Apex, Cast of Wonders, Starline, Dreams and Nightmares, Eternal Haunted Summer, I love that name, and the At This Arts anthology community of magic pens. Her poem on the limitations of photographic evidence in fairyland was published in Eternal Haunted Summer's Summer Solstice 2022 issue, is a Ristling Award finalist. I did not know that, Nicole. Congratulations, that is awesome. Nicole lives in Boulder with her husband and their adorably criminal rabbit. I guess usually you would say criminally adorable. And her not so secret superhero identity. I may have known this, but I've forgotten it. You're officially now probably one of the coolest people I know, Nicole. Her not so secret superhero identity is skater Fleur de Beast with Boulder County Roller Derby. Yeah, find her online at NicoleJLeBoeuf.com. Nicole, take it away.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Yes, the adorable criminal may or may not photobomb us while I'm on air. I will be reading two stories today, a longer one and a very, very shorter one. The first one, the longer one, was first published in Ellen Datlow's Blood and Other Cravings, Vampirism Anthology in 2011. It has been republished several times since, including podcast via Tales to Terrify, and it's called First Breath. Content note for mild, to my mind, body horror, sexual situations, and childbirth. It was time I went in search of myself. Everyone has to do it once in their lives. Each of my parents had years before, and now I felt the pull that said it was my turn. Time to make my own pilgrimage. They saw me off, standing in front of the house and watching me drift down the road. Remember what we told you, my mother said. 1 foot in front of the other. You'll do fine. Hurry home as soon as you can, said my father, a wry smile hiding the sadness of parting. You'll want to be here when the baby arrives. I could only nod, looking first from face to face, then down at the place where my unborn sibling waited to be breathed into life. I wanted to take their hands. I wanted to hold them and never let go. But I couldn't touch them. I could not even speak, not yet. I've stopped counting the Jell-O shots, and I'm starting to lose the spaces between the seconds, if you know what I mean, when the girl shows up right in front of me, the strange one. I've been noticing her on and off throughout the evening, the only person in the bar I've never seen before. My guess is she's just some dumb rich kid up from the flats on a cheap timeshare week, finding out the hard way what all of us locals know. There's nothing to do in mud season. Ski resorts are closed. Everyone's bored out of our skulls and broke. When I first spotted her, I grabbed Mac and pointed. Who's the chick in the gray hoodie? You know her? Mac just went, who? Like he couldn't see her. And he probably couldn't. I actually did count his Jell-O shots before I started on mine. He likes the orange ones. Robbie makes them with 190 proof Everclear. He makes the red ones my favorites with the pepper vodka, and I guess I've downed at least 10 because I have to squint to focus even though the girl's right here. First thing I see are her legs, bare right up to mid-thigh where the hoodie ends. I can't make out much more of her than that, just the tip of her nose and her mouth. She's smiling this weird sort of amazed smile, probably tripping on acid or E or something, which is why I'm annoyed, but not really surprised when she grabs my hand and starts playing with my fingers. Naturally, I try to yank my hand away, but she hangs on, so I end up pulling her off balance and into my lap. Now she's got both her hands on me, feeling her way up my arm like she's never seen an arm before. I roll my eyes and put up with it until she grabs my left boob, and then I've had enough. I slap her hand away. What the hell are you doing? She sits there in my lap, examining her wrist from every angle like she's trying to see if I left a mark. If I weren't so drunk, I'd have dumped her on the floor by now. As it is, I can't seem to get up the momentum. She touches her own face, then mine, and then, "What the hell?" she says, and kisses me. For just an instant, I'm thinking, oh God, another idiot who thinks she's bi when she's stoned. Then the thought dissolves away until there's nothing left but, oh God. It's like something inside me, something I never knew existed, but I can't survive without, rises up and goes spinning out of me and into her. When she pulls away, I can't stop myself. I grab hold of her, pull her back down, make her kiss me again, just to try to get that piece of myself back. It doesn't work. I'm even more lost than before. It takes every shred of concentration just to ask her, "Who are you?" as she runs her fingers through my hair, against my scalp. Something's weird about that. I can feel my head resting against the back of the couch. There's no room between my head and the orange velvet upholstery for her hand to be there, stroking from my hairline to the nape of my neck and making my arms explode in goosebumps. I try again. "What's your name?" She leans in close, lays her cheek alongside mine. "What's your name?" Right in my ear, licking it. The smell of her hair is sweet and slightly bitter, like someplace far away I'll never see. I answer her on automatic, "Jen," and then "God" leaps out of my mouth as her teeth pierce my earlobe. The pain clears my head for a moment. I'm conscious of the warm, wet blossom of blood that drips like melted wax onto my shoulder, and of the absurd and slightly scary fact that I'm pinned under the body of a stranger and she's hurt me. I push at her whatever I can reach, but I'm too drunk to have much effect. In fact, I'm so drunk that her knee, what little I can see of it around her hair and my face, seems to be passing right through the couch cushion. She licks up the blood in 2 slow swipes, and the sudden clarity is just as suddenly gone. I can't think. She kisses me again with my blood on her teeth. More of me vanishes into her. I open my mouth wider so she can take whatever she wants. "Jen, you okay?" Mac's voice. "Jen? Christ, Robbie, how many shots you give her?" "You should talk, Mac. You aren't driving home, are you?" "Nah, walking. So's she, thank God." Someone, Mac, gives my shoulder a rough shake. "Jen, you okay? Can you hear me?" "A little busy now," I mumble around the lips that are slowly killing me. He doesn't seem to hear me. "Jen, sweetie, maybe you should go home? Can you walk okay?" The girl climbs off me and holds out her hand. Her smile is beatific. "Yeah," I say to Mac, unable to take my eyes from the girl's lips. "Yeah, going home." I let her lead me out of the bar and into the parking lot. The 15 minutes it would take to get to my place seems an unbearably long time to wait. On the far side of the parking lot, I try to step up onto the grass and somehow I miss the curb. The girl catches me as I stumble. She nearly falls herself. We sway together against the back of Robbie's camper top pickup truck, and now there's no question of walking to my place or anywhere else. She's at me again like you'd attack your first meal after the rescue copters got you out of the avalanche, and your hunger is a prayer of thanks. She's pulling my tank top over my head, ripping at my bra. It's cold, an early October snow just picking up speed, but I don't stop her. I reach to help her out of that hoodie of hers, only to find it's gone already, just disappeared. Bare skin under my hands. I open my eyes and look into her face at last. Her face. It's my face. She stares back at me with my own eyes, her cheek marred by that same patchy birthmark I've hated all my life, her ear still wearing a clotted bead of my blood. That smile, I only found it so weird on her because it was so familiar. I stare at the living mirror before me, and my hands fall limp at my sides to rest helpless on the truck's tailgate. Only they don't. They pass right through. A chill sweeps my body like I wouldn't wish on anyone. It turns my stomach and stops my breath. I sag and start to fall, and the back of Robbie's truck doesn't stop me. I move through its plastic and metal like a ghost. So does she. She dives forward to catch me, pulls me out into the clear, kneels with me in the snow. I cling to her solidity, and she rocks me in her arms. And then I try to scream because now she's fading. I can't touch her anymore, and I can't touch the air either, so no sound comes out of my mouth after all. No one had told me how much it would hurt. Remember, they'd said, don't get distracted. It's hard not to. Experiencing physical sensations for the first time, it can be dangerously fascinating. Fascinating? Earth underfoot. It was more than fascinating. Jen's skin on mine was meat and drink to me. It was mother song and burnt offerings at dusk. I wanted it to never end. But it did. It had to. I knew that it had to. My parents had told me what to expect. Jen faded in my arms, becoming insubstantial as mist. A spasm seized my throat, making me gasp, and I breathed her in. She was gone. Fascinating, distracted. Oh, yes, but no one had warned me that I would love her. When my parents had recounted their own pilgrimages years gone by, they'd never told me that their first tangible breath had been to weep. I don't know how long I knelt there, alone in the snow, surrounded by Jen's abandoned clothes. Her socks seemed particularly forlorn, half in and half out of her shoes. Her name stuttered uncontrollably off my lips. Her lips. My name now, to remember her by. Her name was mine, and her voice to speak it with. Her clothes were now mine. I remembered I was supposed to put them on. Leave nothing behind. Besides, it was cold out. I could feel the cold sinking its teeth into Jen's body, my body, inch by inch. I could feel. I could pick up a handful of snow. I could wear real clothes of solid fabric, never again need the gray imaginings that habit of thought had dressed me in for years. I could touch. I could breathe. My sobs stilled simply because they made me aware of the miracle that I could cry. Maybe that's why no one mentions the grief. It's gone so soon, replaced by joy. Jen, I said again, and then spoke the first words I could call my own. Thank you. I couldn't quite manage the shoes. The knowledge of them had come into my head with everything else, but I had little experience thus far using fingers. The cold made them clumsier still, putting the puzzle of hooks and eyelets and laces out of my reach. I carried the shoes instead, and the pain of snow on stocking feet was the most precious thing to me during that long walk to Jen's apartment. Walking, at least, I'd practiced, one foot in front of the other. Gravity had become a surprisingly rough playmate, and the alcohol in Jen's system didn't help, but I made a good start. It got easier step by slow, careful step. You'll probably find your way back without trouble, they said. Usually it's a matter of hours. It might take longer, but that's rare. Longer? How much longer? But don't worry about that. Just live her life for however long it takes until the way home opens for you. Days, months of Jen's life stretched out in my imagined future. Each dyed in the colors of boredom, slowly sinking under the weight of years, trapped in the same 2 miles of tourists and ski slopes, and the same people doing the same thing through the unrelenting sameness of endless seasons. But my pilgrimage ended as ordinarily as I could have hoped. I got to Jen's apartment within the hour, fumbled it open with the key from her jeans pocket, and, simply as a dream, found myself walking into my parents' house. They were in the bedroom, my parents, Daya upon the bed and hard into advanced labor. Avel knelt beside her, both his hands enclosing hers. It was dim in there for Daya's comfort, but I could clearly see the sweat glistening in sheets upon her bark-brown face. The breath whistled thinly in and out of her, a terrifying sound. Yet her gaze rose to meet mine. Alerted by her smile, Avel turned. Moments later, I was in his arms. At first, he simply held me, and I felt the uneven rise and fall of his chest that told me he was crying. I was crying too. Finally, he held me out at arm's length and looked me over with grave, careful attention, as though seeing me for the first time. I suppose he was. What had I looked like to him, to either of them, all these years? A gray ghost, seen but never heard, communicating by blurred hand signs they must have strained their eyes to read. No more. I could speak now. But Avel gave me a stern look, and I remembered what my first words upon homecoming needed to be. Avel, my mother, I said, behold your song made flesh. He smiled. It is a beautiful song, he said. Then he brought me to the bedside and addressed the woman laboring there. Daya, father of our child, see the breath you breathed into me. It is a beautiful breath we breathe together. She said it strong despite her travail. What name has our breath brought home? Jen, I told them. Names are important. They're how we remember. Her name was Jen. Daya corrected me. Her name is Jen, and it is a good name. Then she gasped, her smile sliding sharply out of sight. Bone and blood. Oh, see, indeed, the breath you breathed into me. Avel caressed her brow. Now, love, did I complain so when I lay there laboring with our Jen? You did? You complain more. Then it's a good thing we didn't conceive twins, isn't it? Avel chuckled. Imagine Jen coming home to that scene, both of us lying there complaining and cursing. Earth forfend, I delivered this child on a curse. But it was only mock horror. Daya had found strength to laugh again. I was too dazed to join in the joke. Avel had used my name so easily, so naturally. I sank to my knees beside him, the things in my heart too big for my newfound words. I laid my hands upon Daya's belly where the unborn child moved like an extra breath between Daya's breaths. Avel's hand closed upon my shoulder. Jen, he said carefully and clearly, tell me what troubles you. Finally, it burst out of me, and the words, when they came, were so simple. I loved her. It hurt so much. Oh, Jen, murmured Daya. She placed her hand over mine. But why didn't you warn me? I found myself shouting, anger burning through my tears. You both made it sound so technical, practical. Do this, don't do that. Rules. Why didn't you tell me? It would break my heart. The sadness in Avel's eyes shamed me then. What could I have said? What would you have done had you known? Hardened your heart against her? Become a predator devouring prey? Staged it as a tragedy in which you play the starring role? No. He squeezed my shoulder. You both deserved love, and there's no preparing you for that. We could only have ruined it by trying. But what good is love when it killed her? No. Daya's voice, strained as it was, allowed no argument. She is with you, in you, always. She punctuated that with a fierce grip on my hand. She will live in your children and in their children. Avel touched my face, tracing the curve of my cheek. I can see him so clearly in you, he said. In my imagination, he doubled, stood face to face with himself, that other man who had held a life safe and waiting for him to claim. How much I loved him. It makes me love you that much more. A cry from the bed, sharp and surprised. Daya flung her head back against the pillows and drew a breath, and kept drawing it on and on. It seemed she would never stop, not until she'd inhaled every bit of the Earth's atmosphere and become herself a planet with her own weather patterns, her own seas. Avel's hands and mine rose with a profound expansion of her belly. Then, at the crest of the wave, she held that great breath, creating a moment of stillness in which I held mine also. In silence, she smiled at us, the smile of a goddess telling her people, "Be not afraid." I gripped Avel's hand tightly and watched Daya's lips. She opened her mouth and breathed that great breath out, and my sister, insubstantial as a mist, was born. My second story today is much shorter, and I was inspired to choose it by what I heard my opposite number was going to read. So this is one of those rare planned themes. This is called The Rarest of Prey, and it saw publication in Daily Science Fiction, a journal that I really, really miss. "Run," says the unicorn, "please." Saya caresses the soft muzzle, the spider silk mane, breathes the dizzying scents of honeysuckle and musk. You are a miracle. "I am a trap," it whispers. Obedient to its nature, it lays its head in the maiden's lap. Saya falls half asleep herself, bespelled by wonder, as still as the threads of a tapestry. Minutes or hours later, the hunters arrive. "Damn fine specimen. Top dollar on the open market. Hands off," they snicker at the crew. "No devaluing the cargo." They load up and blast off, leaving the unicorn behind. They can always clone another. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That was lovely work. It's our custom to just pause for a moment between authors, take a couple of breaths, just let the work sort of resonate, and then we'll move on. So we're going to do that. We're just going to take a breath. All right, Nicole J. LeBoeuf, thank you so much. B. Pladek is a literature professor and writer based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He's got fiction published or forthcoming in Lightspeed, Strange Horizons, Slate Future Tense Fiction, and elsewhere. His debut novel, Dry Land, which is a queer historical about a World War I era forester who gains the magic ability to grow trees, is out in September 26th. Today, he will be reading the story that was the germ for that novel. B. Pladek, take it away. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. Can everyone hear me okay? This has been malfunctioning a bit recently. Awesome. So I just first off wanted to say a huge thank you to Laura and Daniel for having me on this podcast, and to everyone for listening, and like huge ups to Nicole. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for both of those stories, and for the accidental theme of unicorns. So I'm going to read two stories. The second one is the unicorn story, and Nicole's is much shorter than the first. So the first story is called What the Marsh Remembers. It was first published in a wonderful magazine called Lackingtons, which is now unfortunately on permanent hiatus, RIP. Content notes for the story include some war scenes and some very non-graphic ableism. And one important note before I begin, this story isn't in chronological order, so it's going to be flashing back and forth between the stories present, 1930 at a big marsh in Wisconsin, and two separate pasts. The first is a trench in World War I, and the second is a hospital after the war, where the characters are recovering from some pretty major injuries. Okay. Thank you all so much, and so I'll get started with What the Marsh Remembers. May 1930, Clearwater Marsh, Wisconsin. Rand began at dawn with the peat. 10 years ago, the state had dredged the marsh for farmland, but it had grown nothing but summer fires. Now burns scarred its dry bed. Their black roots reached all the way to the bedrock. Peat was basal. Before the war, at boot camp in Madison, his bunkmate had revealed this to him. Huddled in a cornfield trench, John had pressed Rand's fingers to the wet brick of it. Peat was power, he'd explained with his easy farmer's confidence. The black battery of decades, sometimes centuries of rot. Well cared for, it could feed generations of bulrushes and wading birds. Once consumed, it could not be replenished easily. Now Rand replenished it. After his training at the Bureau of Ecological Restoration, he spread his senses through the marsh's burned floor. Layering sphagnum with water, he mimicked the cycles of decay that press moss into peat. A fragile warmth bloomed around his boots, and he thought of the BER's instructions. Make the marsh forget it was ever burned. As he worked, he plucked the aspen saplings that had colonized the dried peat. Aspens grow fast, John had explained at boot camp, and since they've got rootstocks, they're tough to kill. What's a rootstock? Rand had asked, and John had laughed at him, schoolboy. But the next summer in France he had shown him. Rootstocks, the ghost fingers linked beneath the shelled poplars. Tough to kill, but not impossible. Rand did not know how the BER intended to keep the peat wet or the saplings at bay once he had finished his job. This was his first assignment as a restoration officer, and his last. He had been fired yesterday. He would not see how Clearwater fared once the BER was done with it. 5 years ago, he would have assumed they had a plan. The generals must have a plan, John had said before they went over the top. Noon was too late for birds, but since the war, Rand had hated silent forests. The sadness discernible in some marshes comes from their once having harbored cranes, John had recited as they'd leaned together beneath the charred trees of Bellow Wood, awaiting the German barrage. He'd read slowly. It was the only book he owned. How can a marsh be sad? Rand had asked. Because it remembers what's missing, John had replied softly into the silence. To cheer him, Rand had pointed up toward a far falling whistle. What bird is that? He'd asked, and John had listened just long enough to seize him and shout, Down! Now Rand plunged his senses into the new-laid peat, drawing up saplings, dressing their frail arms with bark. He chose trees to attract the singers, tamaracks for the chickadees, black spruce for the kinglets, blueberry shrub for the waxwings who called in soft, high voices like the ringing after shellfire. On the low flats at the water's edge he seeded cranberries because he knew their fruit would feed cranes. In the hospital, after the armistice, before Rand had learned to walk again, he and John had lain together on his cot and browsed an Audubon guide lent by a BER recruiter. Across its plates bowed a tall, white crane Rand had never seen before. Whooping crane, Grus americana, omnivorous, pair bonding, nest on swampy islands and piled reeds. Mate for life. If we joined the Bureau, could we? Rand had asked. No, John had signed clumsily, his tin jaw rigid as a bird's. Too few left, less than 100 cranes in the wild. The BER had a policy against resurrecting extinct species. Rand had never understood this even after 4 years of university and 5 more of the Bureau's training program. Standing before the instructor, his thigh aching in its girder and John's face fixed and silent, he had asked why. Why not restore everything we've destroyed? We could still save the cranes. They're not even gone yet. Frowning, his instructor had explained that some things were irreplaceable, others not so much. The BER only restored what would be missed. Missed by who? Asked Rand. Is that what you mean by restoration? John had signed. On Clearwater Marsh, Rand's hands worked. Cupping his palms, he summoned the golden crown, the white eyebrows of a kinglet. He breathed on the memory, and the little bird dashed into the spruces. Kinglets had been gone from Clearwater for 10 years now. As far as the marsh knew, they were as doomed as the cranes. Yet here one was, picking at a pine cone. Rand wondered if the marsh remembered it. He cupped his hands again. One by one, the singers took wing. Black-capped chickadees, cedar waxwings, clouds of chatty whitethroats. The new trees filled with song. Restoration? The instructor had asked, once Rand had translated John's question. Yes, that's exactly what we mean. When they had received news of their assignments a year after completing the training program, they had been practicing stairs. Rand's balance was still imperfect. Lift it a bit higher, John had signed. Randolph, you're headed to Wisconsin, the placement officer had announced. John, you're for Oklahoma. Congratulations, boys, on becoming contributing members of society. But I'm from Wisconsin. I don't know anything about the plains, John had said, his strong hands working angrily. Why there? The officer had stared blankly until Rand translated. Then he'd glanced sidelong at John's tin jaw. Lots of tourists in Wisconsin, he'd said. Oklahoma, not so much. He'd turned to Rand. We've got a big job for you, son. Clearwater Marsh, freshwater jewel. The state dredged it 10 years ago. We need you to restore it. We're putting some signs up, maybe a center. Show visitors we're serious about conservation. As the sun slipped down the afternoon, Rand pressed his hands to the peat. From its soft bed, he drew up cattails, bulrushes, and sedges in 5 species. All the plants that, once piled, would make good nests. In the dark water, he shaped hummocky islands, shaded by grasses so that eggs laid there would be well hidden. He wished he knew more about migration routes, what might signal to a pair of white wings coasting far above, stop here. But such information was not part of BER training. In silence, John demanded, but what will I do in Oklahoma? Can't you just deploy us together? Begged Rand. The placement officer had frowned. Not very grateful, are you, boys? As Rand's shadow lengthened over the new reeds, he tapped into the water table below the bedrock. Refilling the marsh had been his core mandate. Put the water back where it was, the Bureau's brief had said. Add whatever species you like, whatever looks natural, so long as it's not too extinct or too ugly. Remember, we've got brochures to print. Now, as Rand drew, Clearwater refilled. Rising water steeped in the peat until it poured like tea around the waiting rushes. Flicking his hands, he filled it with perch and minnows, frogs and mollusks. Cranes were omnivorous. They must really trust you, John had written from Oklahoma a week after they'd parted. Lucky. They want me to reloam 30 acres for a bison preserve, but the dust storms from Texas keep burying it. My supervisor gets angry, but I can't control Texas. Land isn't just one place, you know? Reassignment to Oklahoma impossible, the Bureau's reply to Rand's wire had read. We repeat, reassignment impossible. 2 weeks later, the placement officer had written personally. Say, son, you want this job or not? Do you have the cough now too? John had written 4 months after his first letter. They were getting shorter, the writing more erratic. I'm wondering if the gas is finally catching up with us. Wouldn't mind a new jaw as well. Too much grit in this one. Thigh cramping, Rand leaned against a spruce. Though his knees joint was worn, he could not apply for a replacement. His BER insurance would only last another year, and it depended upon completing Clearwater to Bureau specifications. Massaging his leg, Rand looked out. Beyond the bulrushes rose the drumlin where the future center would stand. Ideal nesting ground, he thought. We repeat, reassignment impossible. Repeat, impossible. No. At dusk, Clearwater fell silent. Hidden in their tamaracks, the dawn chorus slept. Below the water, midges bedded against the spring chill. This was the hour, Rand knew, when the whooping cranes would have danced, bowing their red heads, leaping in unison, lifting their white wings like ghosts summoning the night. Later, their bugles would have welcomed the coming dawn. Gruce Americana, pair bonding, mate for life. Rand had never seen one on the marsh, yet its sadness still seemed theirs. Do you remember how things were before? John had asked in his last letter, a month ago, before they stopped coming. Before what? This time, the placement officer was angry enough to call. That's it, son. After this job, you're through. The Bureau won't tolerate whiners. Finish that march to spec, and then you can walk to goddamn Oklahoma if you please. And don't you dare try to pull a fast one on us. The BER only restores what would be missed. On Clearwater Marsh, Rand raised his hands and swept down a sinuous line. White feathers followed. Do you remember? In Bella Wood, trees planted by France's Bureau were sprouting in the trenches, fast-growing species, poplars and black alder. Their rootstocks filled the shell holes and buried the bones. Do you remember? On the plains to the west, BER officers fought the dust storms that billowed up from the exhausted soil. They planted prairie tallgrass high enough to cover the failed farms, bison skulls, whole nations full of people. Do you remember? Need last known location of Sergeant John Moore, Rand's final wire to Oklahoma had read. I'm traveling south from Wisconsin. Third request. Please reply. Do you remember? The crane loped away from Rand. Its white wings lifted, and it swept trumpeting into the sky. Raising his hands, he made another. It's the end. Okay. So, the second story I'll read is a bit happier, and it's called Spoon. This was a flash that was originally published in a magazine called The Golden Key, which was lovely and also, unfortunately, has since ended and has disappeared from the internet. Thank you all so much again for listening. And this is the unicorn story, although the unicorn doesn't show up until the very end. So, Spoon. I was the second object the princess touched when she gained the gift to enliven dead things. But she did not notice me between the clacking puppet and meowing harpsichord. So I was left for the cook to clear as the princess barreled out of her parlor, gasping, drawing trails of murmurs down the waking walls. She never knew me, for soon a magician came to fit her with the appropriate gloves, and another, later, to kiss the curse away. In and out of cherrywood cupboards I was drawn and placed beside my mute colleagues, as the princess grew silver as myself and finally, untarnished, died. I was late at her funeral service, her husband could not eat, where all objects, even those she had touched, maintained a respectful silence. The castle changed hands. At the estate sale, I sat beside a forgotten halfpence who whispered that the crown was in arrears, that to maintain itself, it had leased its land, which lay above rich coal deposits, that everything was changed. I had no reply. I am a spoon who boasts one use to a pence's 1,000, who knows only the insides of people's lives, which shift so rarely. And when I was bought by a petite bourgeoisie, at first nothing indeed changed. I was removed, buffed, arranged on stiff linen, and raised by soft hands to soft mouths, sipping thin, expensive soup. Silence returned, for I had lost puppet and harpsichord and halfpence, the only objects that could hear me. But gradually the meals grew sparser and poorer, the mouths harder. I stayed in drawers for months, blackening and breathing sawdust, until one day my cupboard was wrenched open. Smoke fell in like snow, and rough hands dumped me in potato burlap to be humped through streets that smelled of fire. Tossed roughly against a splintered barricade of furniture and old carts, none of which could speak, I was removed to hastily ladle milk-soaked crusts into a young man with forlorn eyes, whose musket shielded piles of books like a mother's arm shields a child. Later, I lay in his blood. For a long time, shimmering in its red mist, the city's roaring day refused surrender to night. I longed for the halfpence or the harpsichord to make sense of things, for the wisdom of those items to which people, even if rarely, whispered their purposes. Instead, a rat waddling by took pity on me. Stepping out from among her squeaking progeny, she said, "The crown is over, and so is magic. I'd lay low if I were you." And to my query, "Of course I'm not a real rat." Obliging, she carried me off to her lair of carded wool and gnawed straw beneath a barn. "Staying out of sight's the best thing for magic folk these days. I wonder what the dragons have resorted to," she said. I never found out, nor did she. Rats, even magic ones that aren't really rats, have short lives. For a time I lived beneath the barn, a tongue of ore in dust, while 1,000 generations of rat children flowed by me, snuffling and resourceful, unmagic. Above me the barn circled a zodiac of smells. Rot, fire, mustard gas, mud, diesel, ozone, and finally rot again. In that time I met no companionable objects, though the people flickering in and out of that place used me without speaking, as they pleased, to lift broth or penicillin, scratch an itch, bruise open a can, or at last, sharpening my handle, to kill. Then, for a long, long time, there was silence and the nosing smell of green. Finally, one warm afternoon, a clever deerfoot snapped through the plank laid over me by the murderer. Looking up, I saw a unicorn. "A conscious spoon," it said with that dry, scholarly bemusement all unicorns have. In the silence, sunlight rang on its horn like a bell. "Yes, there are a few humans left, a few, but more spoons, even if they mostly don't talk." It stamped philosophically. "What do you mean, what will you do now?" "You are what they call a utensil, something defined by its use. Now that your users are gone, you must find your own." So saying, the unicorn knelt beside me like marble bowing under water. Folded there, still as dawn, we talked and talked and talked. We had time. Unicorns are immortal, but perhaps because of this they bore easily. 200 years had scarcely passed, and the scratchy alder thicket in the ruins of the barn barely given way to oaks, when the unicorn rose, shook its mane, and fled silverly to its next conversation. I did not see it again, or any others, but I thought about my purpose. I thought, as around me the oaks thickened and burned and died and regrew, as the earth yawed north and the oaks bristled into jack pines packed in snow like sawdust, pitched south and puddled into banana fronds and runnels of vines, cracked and split and fused in ripples of ore against which the pewter sea hissed, molten. I thought as the moon spun away and the days lengthened, and the sun swelled like an apple in the sky. I thought until its ripeness enveloped the earth, a smell of warmth and ozone, ions thick as rich soup. And as I tasted that richness, I knew it all at once, saw my end, my purpose, as my metal wilted against the crumbling earth. If the princess could see me now, I thought, as trembling I performed my last and greatest service. Cupping the sun in my silver palm, I raised it gently to the earth's lips. The end.
Well, Pladek, everyone. Lovely work. Thank you so much. Boy, Laura, we are so lucky.
We really are. It's been really amazing tonight, the way we've been just writing the swells of the stories from horror to delight and back.
Yeah. It was really just very sort of cohesive program. It was just kind of perfect. We never planned these, folks, you know, I mean, but both, you know, all 4 stories just fit like a clock. I mean, it was just wonderful.
Mhm.
Nicole
Not
J.
puzzle.
LeBoeuf, B. Pladek, thank you so much for joining us with Story Hour, and thank you all out there for coming back again to share your very valuable time with us. Thanks to my co-host, Laura Blackwell, without whom I would be utterly unable to sustain this. So I'm really grateful for your partnership in this effort. And we will see you next week, where Marie Brennan and Amanda Cook will be joining us. So
Although I do need to qualify that Marie Brennan is going to be reading as M.A. Carrick.
oh, thank you.
Marie Brennan is half of M.A. Carrick, and I wasn't very clear about that when I wrote that down earlier. However, she does want us to know that it is just Marie Brennan and not her co-conspirator and other part half of M.A. Carrick, Elise Helms. So
Thank you for the
it's very
clarification.
complicated.
Well, you know, I mean, come back next week, folks, to find out just what the hell we're talking about. So
Fantasy stories. It'll be a
we'll
fantasy story week.
see you then.
I'm pretty sure of that.
Cool. Awesome. Night, everybody.